All right, Veronica, let's take a look at your paper. I'm going to start looking at your Emily format. This is all good. You've got page numbers with your last name. That is good. Excuse me. So I've already gone through it once. Some in-text citations. There's a few moments where I think you're going to need some more. We'll talk about those when we get there. Now, when we get to your works cited, first of all, you have all this extra space that you need to get rid of. This needs to be at the very top of this page, as you can, right below your page number. And then this should say works with an S, cited. You don't need the page. Everything is alphabetical order. However, you have the indenting wrong. So the first line needs no indent. And then your second line and every line after that does need an indent. So you need a backspace here and indent this line. You don't start with an indented, you start with a not indented. So that way, if we look at, let me pull this up, sample MLA page. And part of the reason we do this is because it makes it a little bit easier when we need to look at your sources, or when people need to look at your sources. So if you notice here, I don't know if this is going to be 100% correct, but this is a little bit of an older version, but I can easily go and look at, okay, Klein, Dr. Giloff, NPR, Albert Rizzo. It all sticks out a little bit, so this is kind of how you need your work cited. And I understand for the websites, it's not going to do it correctly in Google Docs. You may have to retweak it a little bit. So I'm fine if that's there, but you need to redo the indenting here. But other than that, it looks okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you are missing one of the sources you needed because you needed 5 total. But we will see some other things you have. So, as far as your title goes, it's an okay start. Anxiety, depression in today's society. I think it needs some tweaking. It's not exciting in any way, and sometimes it can be simple, but it doesn't tell me enough about your paper other than anxiety and depression in today's society. It should give me a little bit of a glimpse to what you're arguing and a little bit of glimpse in of your own style with it. So as we look at your introduction, it starts off kind of simple. Anxiety and depression are 2 different health problems that people can have. Yep, people can have health problems, so I don't know if that's the strongest intro. If you just said are 2 different health problems that occur, I don't know. They can affect your body. You want to avoid the second person. You could just say affect someone's body physically and mentally. And because of this, you don't need the comma either. You only need the comma if this is like a complete sentence, and it's not. And then you have many people that have anxiety can also develop depression, and you want to say or vice versa, not just vice versa. Then you define anxiety and depression. I don't think you necessarily need the sentence right here. I think it's just kind of filler for your paper. I think defining anxiety and depression is okay. And then you've got an awkward space here. You've got a double space here. And Veronica, there's a few times where you have this double space between words or sentences. So especially as you move on, you want to make sure that you're catching these easy to fix errors in your paper. So you go on into about how it's more prevalent than it was 20 years ago. And then you explain why, which is pretty good. And then I actually do like how you leave off the intro. 1 to 13 suffer from anxiety globally. 20 years ago, this number was much lower. My only area of caution is this is just anxiety. It's not necessarily depression. And then I'm curious to know if this says this with the World Health Organization that it's gone up. Because when you have this, if this is coming from the World Health Organization, you need an in-text citation. And if it's not, you need evidence for it. And if you look at your resources, I don't see anything with the World Health Organization. But I've seen this come up again and again, and I don't remember exactly where it's coming from. But if it's coming from one of these articles where they talk about statistics from the World Health Organization, then you need to cite them. But the problem there is, at this point, it is technically plagiarism. if you say this, because yes, while you have it in this aforementioned sentence, you don't have it in the next one. But other than that, I do kind of like how the intro is set up. I think the beginning, you need to find different ways to set up your paper. But other than that, just kind of the build up with it. And I think leaving this number is a good way to do. Now, one thing I might challenge you to do as you move on, and you may be challenged to do in 11th grade, is to have an open thesis where you just say, anxiety and depression has become more prevalent in adolescence than it has been before. And the reason I say that is because you have a bad case of, let's say exactly what I did in the intro again later on in the paper. And it's more prevalent because of the invention of technology. Okay, so you literally said that right here, just got rid of this. So it's just kind of adding things where I think you could have a more topical sentence. So you're saying because of the invention of technology, so I have a few issues with this as well. So the invention of technology, this is kind of a broad statement, but technology has always been here, but your main focus is actually on social media, which is different than technology. So I think you're more looking at the advent of social media versus technology, because technology has been here for hundreds of years. On a technicality, people can argue that technology has been here since the beginning of the world and mankind. So I'm a little not too thrilled with that one right there. I mean, I know you talk about social media, but I don't think this is really, I don't think the topic sentence is adequate for what you're really talking about. And your topic sentence tells me this is all about the invention of technology, which is very subjective, which I think it's more about social media. But you do a good job of incorporating some evidence down here about, and including social media anxiety disorder. But once again, we have right here, if this is from Fader, and she is saying this is social media anxiety disorder, you need to include a citation here where you have the space, parenthesis, Fader, parenthesis, period. And the other thing I would encourage you to do is, for something like this, Sarah Fader, that's a random name to me. And I would say you need to give some credit to who she is, or at the very least, be like, in her article on this, it states this, because otherwise, whoop, let me go up here. Right here. She's the CEO and founder of Stigma Fighters. So she works specifically as an advocate to get rid of stigma for mental illness. And even something as simple as Sarah Fader, a writer, in her article published on the Anxiety and Depression Association of America website, that speaks more volume to her credibility than it does just Sarah Fader, because other than that, I have no idea who she is. But overall, and then you move into cyberbullying. So this is what I would encourage you to do. Cyberbullying is different than an addiction to social media. I think you need to split the two and have it be its own paragraph. And there we have the spacing issue again. So you really need to make sure that you're fixing those simple, easy to catch spacing issues. But these are two separate things. And you already had a topic sentence of technology. You didn't really stick to it, but the main bulk of this paragraph is social media addiction. Let that be one paragraph and let cyberbullying be its own. And then what I would say is your last two sentences I have some concern with. The first one, this can cause suicide to a lot of teenagers. That's just some awkward wording that you need to pay some more attention to. This can cause teenagers to have suicidal thoughts or eventually commit suicide, period. That would be a better sentence with it. This can cause suicide. It's kind of an awkward phrasing. And last one, this is a really kind of weak argument. Cyberbullying was not around 20 years ago because there was no social media. I mean, the internet existed, and I believe you could email, so maybe cyberbullying did exist, but it's kind of a weak argument to be like, well, social media didn't exist, so this didn't happen. You really need to focus on what it is social media is doing, and that's what your focus should be. But overall, it's an okay paragraph. You just need to split those two ideas into one. All right, so when we move on to your next paragraph, Veronica, this is kind of, it's just not a good topic sentence. because you're just saying it's more prevalent. And you've basically started every topic sentence the same way. It's more prevalent than it was 20 years ago. Oh, we've only looked at a few. It's more prevalent than it was 20 years ago. Some people think it wasn't as prevalent. So you need to find a new way, because you're reusing and recycling the same phrasing. You need new ways to find topic sentences that are going to look at more what your paper is about. And what this paragraph is to me is child or any kind of trauma. So I think what you should really have your topic sentence be is anxiety and depression can be induced as a result of trauma. And that is very simple, and that tells me your paragraph is going to be about these two mental illnesses related to trauma, which is exactly what you do. As far as NOAC goes, the first time you really do the source, you need to introduce who they are, what's the article, what it's about. You don't have any context to what NOAC is, and you don't really have a way that you embed the quote. You need some kind of way, instead of just leaving a quote by itself. This is kind of thrown out here. If you just, I don't know, I think some retweaking of phrasing would make it better. So if the child is feeling traumatized, that will affect their lifestyles and how the pain will still be in their body for a long time. This is a little bit awkward. It affects how the pain will be in their body for a long time. I think maybe how they endure the pain can be a better phrasing. And then you go into some examples of how they can have trauma. This doesn't match your verb agreement here. If they are abused, someone that they loved and cared for dies, and child neglect. This needs to be rephrased to something like, and if they were neglected. And then right here, what we have here, all you've kind of done is you said, okay, here are 3 things that cause trauma. And now let me say the same thing, but put it in a longer sentence. So you basically just said, here's just more of me saying these exact things that I just said also cause trauma. It's the same thing. You don't need it. So I think you need some more evidence about how trauma has maybe increased, because your thing is, if it's more prevalent, that means maybe more trauma is happening. So you need to be aware of that. And you kind of did it here with the social media by proving to us that there is a known anxiety disorder as a result of this, and we've become dependent on it, So as we move on, we have the same topic sentence that we need. And this is the kind of thing where you don't have any evidence or research here. And this is kind of the stereotype. And I know this is probably true, but you don't have any evidence for it. And especially at this point where I've looked at enough papers and I know the research behind this, it is out there. And for you to say, well, people try to fit in, they're in these cliques, high school has these different groups, you need that evidence that proves that these things cause anxiety and depression. Now, my problem with your counter argument is I didn't make it that everyone had to do an argument. I wasn't very meticulous about telling you all this, but you don't even explain what the counter argument is. You just say some people believe it was more prevalent in adolescents 20 years ago today, but you don't explain why. And part of the counter argument is you need to incorporate why they believed what they believed and then counter that a little bit more. Because you go on to talk about standards, and this is just a rehashing of everything you basically said previously, which doesn't do a whole lot. The good part of a counter argument is to say people think this is why, and then go in with your own research that says, no, this is wrong. Okay? And then from the opposition, you go into these symptoms again. I don't really know why you talk about the symptoms so late. I think this needs to be bumped up a lot earlier, because this just seems awkwardly placed. And at the very end, you still got some of those typo issues, and it doesn't really have a whole lot of substance to what your paper was about. So you need to add more to here, and maybe even a call to action, or what's going to happen if we don't address these issues. You need something with more substance. So overall, Veronica, I know you follow a typical pattern of how to write papers. What I need to challenge you on is you have some decent ideas here. They're not all backed up by research and evidence, and that's what you need to focus on. You definitely need to fix these typos because these plague the paper. And you just need to add more context to what's going on. So consider the things I've said throughout the video, and then we'll go from there.